Welcome to Ask the Professor. I'm Professor Ben. I'm your host, and we get together live every Wednesday for about 20 minutes. We bring experts together, and we talk about all things business and influence. And today, of course, we are joined by our producer, Ari. Ari, thank you for chiming in and helping us pull this together every time. And we also have the one and only Brendan Coughlin, founder and CEO of AllianZ Consulting. And I got to say, probably one of the best cold callers out there. Brendan, thank you for joining us today.
Glad to hear, Ben. You're making me blush. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you guys.
You know, that is my goal, is to make our guests blush every single time. But in all seriousness, I've heard your recordings. I've seen the results. And when it comes to leading a sales team, when it comes to picking up the phone and getting on those cold calls, I don't know many people who are better than you at doing that, which is great. And today we're going to leverage your expertise and your experience, and we're going to dive into the 3 pillars of cold calling. So for those of you in the audience that are hearing this for the first time, the 3 pillars of cold calling, you should know this by now. Command, always ending with a question. And the 3rd pillar is always providing 2 options. Oh, look at that. All right, thank you for putting up on the screen. Absolutely critical, no matter what your cold calling strategy is, what your brand is, what your approach is. When it comes to cold calling, these 3 pillars are non-negotiables. And Brendan, you've seen it real life in your company. I've heard this in sales teams for years. If you just change anything and make sure that they're doing these 3 or owning these 3 pillars, that's when you start seeing the biggest difference, which is really important. Now, Brandon, before I start pulling on you, it's important for our audience to know that you've built, pretty much your entire empire through cold calling. In fact, I would guess, tell me if I'm wrong here, over the last 5 years, 85-90% of your business and your growth has come from cold calling specifically, with the rest of it made up probably through referrals. I know you get a lot of referrals as well in your business. That's a big deal, right? Seeing that you can grow the company to the size that it is from your efforts and your SDR team efforts in making cold calls and booking appointments, and of course securing those appointments and providing a great solution. So what's the magic? What are you doing so well to get so many appointments?
Yeah, so obviously we're a B2B business. We have a service. We call on CFOs, controllers. We've tried everything. We've tried email marketing. We've tried ads, LinkedIn reach outs, you name it. Obviously, anything we can try, we want to, and we've really had mediocre results, except with the cold calling piece. Yeah, believe it or not, in 2025, people are still picking up the phones and answering, and it's just magic what this device, obviously you're probably dialing on a dialer, can do. Where people, we live in this world where there's robots calling you get automated text messages, everyone's annoyed, but you still get people that are answering the phone, and business still gets done that way. And that's the way that we've found to be most successful with the work that we do.
That makes sense. And I've heard you in action. Okay. So I've seen the way that you schedule appointments, listening to these calls. Sometimes I'm thinking there's no way he's going to schedule this one. And sure enough, by the end of the call, they're scheduling the appointment. They're happy to be there. And of course, we got to talk about show rates. We got to get them to actually show up and want to be there, which is important. So let's dive into the 3 pillars. Okay. And then of course, for you in the audience, if you have questions specifically about cold calling or specifically about leading an SDR team, that is why we're here. It's why we're going live, is to answer your questions and support you through these business challenges.
Sorry, Ben.
Go ahead. Yeah, please.
Interrupt you, but we also have a cold calling worksheet to help you get in that mindset and set those micro goals. Ben, I'm sure you're going to talk about those later, but that's a worksheet to kind of get you in that mindset.
Oh, heck yeah. Okay. So is that what the QR code is? Is that how they access?
Yeah. So all you have to do is scan the QR code, and that will take you to a development tool where you can go ahead and download that worksheet.
Nice. Okay. Very, very nice. Great. So all these free supplies and tools that you have just for being on the live. Thank you guys for being here. So let's go into command. And This one, Brendan, I know that you are such a stickler with the details for your team, also for yourself. You hold yourself to that same standard. You're such a stickler when it comes to command and the importance of your tone, your inflections, your pace when you're making these cold calls. Open our eyes to the importance of this and how you get it to work so well.
Yeah. So again, kind of going back to we're living in 2025 where you get automated messages, you get a lot of people calling from other countries where you know that they're not near you and they're selling you something that they don't even know. Hey, is this the business owner? Hey, is this, hey, how are you doing today? Everyone's kind of what do they call it? Numb to those sorts of situations, and they just call and hang up immediately. Or you just hang up immediately, or you just say you're not interested because they're just a solicitor. You don't know what they're calling about. So the command is, hey, you are captivating them immediately, the person that you're calling. Like, oh my gosh, they have something important to say and I need to listen to them. And the analogy we usually use with our team is, think if you're like a father or a mother speaking to your child of something that they need to pay attention to, or, teaching them a lesson. Or the other one is, you're at a party with your friends and you've had a friend who's had too much to drink. You're not going to talk to that friend and say, hey, how are you doing? You shouldn't take those keys. John, I saw you have 5 beers. You're not driving home today.
Yeah.
It's about.
Oh my God. That made me feel like, wait, was I drinking just now? No, it was not. But you got my attention with the tone. Ari, do we have a visual for just the command component with the instructions of that? Let's get that up on the screen because that'll help a little bit here. And I heard these as you were giving that example, Brendan, is that downward inflection. It wasn't a question. No. It wasn't, hey, you're not driving home today, right? It wasn't like a suggestion to see if I should drive or I should not drive. And same thing when the person is making those cold calls, right? We're not interrupting their day for some kind of random idea. This is something that's important, that's going to change the way they do business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other analogy we use too is like, if you've ever ridden a horse, the horse can feel if you're anxious. Same thing with the prospect on the phone. So, when you know your service and your products and you can speak to that CFO without the jitters and just know that, hey, I have something important to say. I'm confident. I know how I'm going to be able to handle any objection that comes up. And you speak to them on their level and then you don't give your control away. That's when you're going to start seeing results.
Hey, that's a great analogy. You've never actually shared that one with me before. And the family and I will ride horses like, once a year or something like that, just something fun to do. And that is really true. The horse can absolutely know what you're thinking, how you're feeling, not just when you're trying to steer them, but if you're nervous, if you really don't want to be there, they feel that vibe and they respond and they react to it. It's the same thing that our callers do. That's great. That's a big deal. Look at this. So Iris Andy, downward inflection is new. That's an important one. So great catch there, Iris.
Do you want me to talk about state at all right now, Ben, or?
Hey, you know what? If you want to talk about it, I'm ready. So this is something that I'll do a little intro before we go to the second pillar. Is you spend a lot of time helping your team be in the right state of mind, the mindset, and you're such a stickler on how this works because of the effects that it brings and the results that it brings. So walk us through a little bit what you're doing with the team when it comes to getting them in the right state. And the thing is probably most impressive that I see is that this is not a one-time conversation you have with them. This is not a weekly conversation that you have with them. This is an ongoing, minute-by-minute, play-by-play conversation to make sure that their head is in the right place every time that phone rings. But yeah, walk us through how you're helping your team get in the right state of mind.
Yeah, so obviously we're talking about command. You're sitting on your dialer, there's numbers flowing through. You see people that may or may not answer, and then one pops up on the phone, or if you're manually dialing, you may get 10 to 30 opportunities a day where you get somebody on the phone, and you need to be ready. So how do you be ready and be in this high state environment? Tony Robbins calls it peak state. You've heard flow state.
Yeah. Yes.
We do stuff at the top of the hour, like 3 minutes to a peak state, where we do a couple of different breathing exercises. We get out of our seats and do a little bit of a stretch. And then we literally play our favorite song for 1 minute and jump up and down and pump our arms. raises your heart rate up. It gets you in the mindset. So you're ready to show up for that next hour. You get out of your seat, you shake it out, and you get yourself in a high energy state, ready to handle that call as it comes up, so that you're ready, like, boom. Hi, sir.
Yeah, and it hits hard. And just like the horses that we're talking about, the person on the other end of the line feels it, right? Okay, if they're interrupting me, this must be important. I can tell by their tone, by their command. And I love that music part is such a big deal. So I used to drive 40,000 miles a year in outside sales many lives ago. And sometimes you're driving for 2 hours, 3 hours before you get to a meeting. And if any of you ever been on a road trip, that can exhaust you all by itself, right? A 3-hour drive right before a big important meeting. And so being in the right state of mind on that last leg of the trip, music definitely has an impact. Breathing has a big impact. Where your thoughts go has a big impact. If you're not doing that as a sales leader with your sales team, encouraging them to do the things that Brendan is talking about, you're missing out on a huge chunk of what makes sales professionals, athletes, and other professionals extremely successable. Big deal.
Absolutely. And one thing to add to that too is the breathing and like the state. Like, sometimes if you haven't, that you're not just a beginner that hasn't done this before. Sometimes when you're pitching, you're kind of running out of breath before the pitch is over. You can just feel it's weak. You can feel that you're like pushing on your diaphragm and you're like forcing it out. And then other times when you're in the zone, maybe you just got a meeting, maybe you just got a sale. It's just flowing out. There's not a lot of effort to it. Well, think of that's the state. You are in the right state. You are in a peak state to make it fucking happen. Sorry, I don't know if I was allowed to cuss. But
yeah, I don't think the FCC is going to be okay with that there, Brendan. But
oh my gosh, sorry.
We're going to put an explicit lyrics sticker on this on this line.
Sorry about that.
But that's okay. But it's easy to get. Again, you get that energy flowing, and you are ready to make it happen. So sometimes that'll happen. It's great, really good. Let's go on to our next visual on those, if you can find those, Ari. So this is always end with a question. Now, I've seen this again. I've seen this with your sales team, seen this with so many sales teams, that sometimes we're going through our pitch or we have a planned response that we're going through. And when we finish that response, we just sit there. And it gives me the image of like a boxer in a ring, just sticking his or her chin out, waiting to get hit. As a salesperson, waiting to get the no, waiting to get hung up on. And we're just waiting for that to happen. Instead, let's take control of the conversation. When we end with the question, we're now empowering the other person to think. We're forcing them to have to think and answer that question. And everyone who's had sales training has heard this. The person asking the questions is the person that's in charge. And of course, it could be making statements like labeling, for example. So it doesn't always have to be a question with a question mark, but it's the person who is requiring the other people in the conversation to think, to use their brain, to make a connection. That's the person that's in charge. So what have you seen in this, Brendan, with always ending with a question versus sometimes when not? What's your team having success with?
Well, I think this kind of also leads into the next one that we'll cover too, which is giving two options. But if you're asking a question and giving two options, you're giving your prospect the perception of choice while you have all the control. Hey, John, we could meet with you sometime late next week, or we could do the week after that. Which would work better for you?
Oof.
Either option is a win for you. You want them to choose one, versus if you just say, hey, when could I follow up with you? You've kind of given all of your power away. There's a right way to ask ask a question at the end of the sentence. It's by giving two options.
So those examples that you gave right there, and then we have Violet. Yes, I love the perception of choice. Yeah, that's an important part. And as buyers, as prospects, we want to have that perception. We want to feel like we have a choice. And then not to mention that we're just throwing chaos out there. When you said, hey, when do you want to meet again? I mean, that is just absolute chaos. The first thing that your prospect is thinking about is, what meetings do I have? What deadlines do I have? Oh my gosh, my calendar is way too full. They can't even have the opportunity to make a choice because you're throwing that chaos out there. It's like a bomb you're just throwing right there in their lap. The two choices gives them a whole different way to just streamline chisel out the chaos, and then say, okay, which one of those two choices do I want? Which one works best for me? I want to have that perception of choice.
Absolutely.
That's a great one. And so so covering through those and thinking about different approaches in cold calling, and how I've heard sales teams that try to take in their branding, try to take a more technical approach. Some try to take a more personable approach. I've seen great results from all of those. The bottom line here is, if you're not including the 3 pillars as part of your structure, if you're not intentional with your tone, with the command, with your pacing, with your volume, if you're not doing that intentionally, you're missing out on so many opportunities. You're now just noise of a cold caller, right? If you're not asking those questions at the end of your statements, you're missing out on an opportunity to empower, with the perception of choice, your prospect. And then, of course, those 2 choices, you give a great example there, Brendan, on those 2 choices. So we got a few minutes left here. And one of the things that always impresses me with your team, I think is worth talking about, is just the amount of coaching you provide, the amount of practice that you require to even have a shot to get on your SDR team, not to mention stay on your SDR team. Where do you get the time? What's the benefit of all the practice that you require from your team?
Well, yeah, it kind of goes back to what you just left off on, which is, we've had the same pitch or a similar pitch for the last 2 years. And sometimes we show up and we have terrible results. And it's the classic, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, and it's how you show up. So obviously, as a team leader, I need my team to be motivated. So, we want to motivate them intrinsically and extrinsically. But yeah, it really kind of comes down to, how you show up, and also just being there as a leader to be in the trenches with them. Even as the team leader, I'm making 300 cold calls a day, throughout my meetings. So you want to lead by example there. I don't know if that answers your question, Ben.
It does. I think that's a really important part. Now, not all sales leaders have the time or the bandwidth, depending on their requirements. So I get it, definitely get it. But man, putting your money where your mouth is, picking up the phone, being part of that team, and making that happen. I've seen you motivate your team because they're having a dry spell, and then you break the ice. You get through that dry spell, and then just like magic, right? All of a sudden, one person gets one, next person gets one, next person gets one. You start seeing how contagious success can be on an SDR team, and they need that. And they absolutely need that. You guys are cheering each other on, and you're keeping them in that state throughout, for sure. And man, I knew this would happen with you on the show. Time is just flying by. We're already at 20 minutes here. So, Brendan, I'm asking you live where everyone can hear it. Can we get you back on the show in a couple of weeks? Let's talk more about what you're doing with your SDR team, how you're leading them, and what's bringing you so much success. Is that something you can commit to right now live?
I'd be happy to. Yeah, no problem.
All right, guys, you heard it here. We'll see Brendan here in a couple of weeks. So really excited to have you back. And I'm digging more into how to make our SDR successful. If you are an SDR, you definitely don't want to miss that show. You definitely want to watch this recording if you didn't catch the full thing. And if you're leading SDRs, this is your opportunity to brainstorm with one of the best out there. So looking forward to seeing you on that next episode. Ask your questions, and we'll be here to support you through all things business and all things influence. Hey, Ari, do we have a outro song? I think we do. We played too. Let's go and hit that.
Of course we do. Here we are.